This video is sponsored by Surfshark. Surfshark is a quick and stable VPN service that is able to provide privacy for any and all of your sensitive information, easily mask your real location, and more. In particular, Surfshark's ability to change your virtual location to bypass censorship everywhere allows anyone to access content that they normally wouldn't be able to. Surfshark liberates your internet by unblocking blocked websites and bypassing geo-restrictions, meaning that you can access television, film, and other types of media regardless of where you are, including up to 15 Netflix libraries. And in addition to that, it's the only VPN service that can offer one account to use on an unlimited number of devices. You can use my code, Alexander, to get 83% off, as well as an extra 3 months for free. A link with access to all of this will be provided in the description below, and Surfshark offers a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk to try it out for yourself. Many thanks to Surfshark, and on with the video. At its core, Death Note is a pretty traditional lamentation of a story, covering messages that have been covered before and will be covered in the future ad infinitum. But what matters just as much, or even more than the ideas covered by a story, is how it presents them, and the strength and hook of this series is how it conveys these messages in such an interesting and powerful way. In particular, one of the things that helps it distinguish itself is the addition of the supernatural element. The Shinigami, grim reapers in the indolent purgatory of their own realm, who write down the names of humans in their notebooks to end their lives, and as a result, extend their own lifespan. Shinigami are detached onlookers, sleepwalking through their lives with a sigh, doing whatever they can to pass the time in this mundane place. And the most important Shinigami in the story, Ryuk, dials that up to 11. He is the most bored, the most disillusioned with existence. And in the beginning, he's desperately looking for something to excite him and break him out of this funk, some sort of diversion. Ryuk is sort of like a passive version of a jester in this story. He's a bona fide hedonist. While he doesn't need sustenance, he's hooked on apples like a junkie. And while he doesn't need entertainment, he latches on to Light Yagami in the hopes that the latter will use the Death Note to provide him with some. He's a witness to events, sometimes partaking when it suits him or when things get interesting, questioning Light, observing others, and most of all, just having fun with this whole spectacle. And that's the key here. It's all spectacle. While there is an amount of respect there is zero proper emotional investment for him. Ryuk joined Light because he had nothing better to do, and determined that he would leave once Light's life was finished and once the excitement was over. That was their deal of sorts, and it never stopped being entirely transactional.
It was good while it lasted. We eased each other's boredom for quite a while. Well, Light, it's been interesting.
What better way to spend meaningless time than to watch the attempts of someone possessed by power lust trying to change the world? But there was absolutely no sentiment involved here. This detached nature and his increased lifespan help show us one of the symbolic and thematic roles of Ryuk and the Shinigami as a concept, and how all of this comments upon the primary ideas of the story. I've said before that Death Note is an intriguingly energized tragedy of sorts, a roller coaster of a psychological thriller that grips the audience and doesn't let go until the very end, but one that effectively contrasts that style with a deep profundity when it comes to the themes on display, which is often felt in the moments of quiet contrast. This story is all about the seemingly never-ending and cyclical nature of power struggles, about how the human ego is a bottomless pit that is often left unsatisfied no matter what happens. about hubris and repetitious history, and how humans will probably never stop fighting one another, due in part to this inner darkness. It's a somber sort of message saying something totally grand that sprawls outwards from the time span of the story, commenting upon the past and future and how humans will repeat this over and over and over. It's quite a sad concept, and through the nature of the Shinigami, and in particular the role of Ryuk, this is powered home. It's mentioned in the story that Shinigami don't really have any purpose and continuously write humans' names down in the death notes to prolong their lives simply because they're afraid of death. And in this sense, they mirror humans in a way, driven to commit actions with no real end goal in sight due to fear. While those in the human world cling on to power and pride to prevent relinquishing the control they crave in whatever aspect of life that may apply to, those in the Shinigami world simply dwindle the days away on repeat because they're scared of losing what little they have. And ultimately, these instinctual impulses don't end up benefiting either side. Not really. But apart from narrative symmetry, it makes sense that there is this overlap between humans and Shinigami, this innate drive to maintain authority. There are some Shinigami that never enter the human realm, but those who do are keyed into the true nature of the place. And even those who never glimpse it are able to infer things through the ceaseless influx of deaths. They've been around for so incredibly long that the few years that Death Note takes place in are presented as but a tiny pinprick of time in the vast expanse that was Ryuk's life. And while he does frequently find joy in the humans in the story, and while he does find them interesting, this is all an outlier from the normally dull human world. Ryuk would later reflect on this time and conclude that their world was no more exciting than his own, with the exception of the events surrounding one man. And as such, these years were nothing but a tiny diversion to save him from the mundanity. And once they were finished, he returned, as he always planned to do. All of these elements combined make the striking scene of a silhouetted Ryuk at the end, chronicling the life and death, the rise and fall of Light Yagami, the most powerful image in Death Note for me. It's an encapsulation of these cyclical power struggles. In human history, at any point in time, there will always be a rise, always be a fall, and it will all repeat itself again. All of the human characters in the story were deeply affected by everything that happened. Understandably so, as so many of them died and were deeply betrayed. But in the eyes of a Shinigami, it was just another bout of spectacle. While this was the greatest bit of excitement to make a stir in the realm for quite some time, it's not like it was anything totally new or different when it came to humans. Shinigami have seen or known this type of thing to happen so many times before. Maybe not quite to the level of insanity as shown in the story, but regardless, time is a flat circle. They've bore witness to the atrocities of man, of all of the tragic and exciting and brutal sides of humanity, seen so many outcomes of death, and taken note of them all. So much that while a foolish soul initially set on changing the world may be fun to witness for a few years, nothing truly stirs them anymore. The story of Kira is obviously a contextually remarkable one, yet even that didn't move the cold Shinigami any more than a pretty decent comedy sitcom would. This has all happened before, and it will all happen again, and the Shinigami will be ever present, constantly recording this, doomed to tedium and monotony. Looking upon this sad world with a bored sigh, as the humans repeat the mistakes that will lead them to destruction again and again, never learning a damn thing. Nothing has ever changed, and nothing will. And that's why these Reapers are living in an existential purgatory that never properly excites. The only one who was deeply emotionally invested, Rem, lived somewhat similar to how a human would, and was destroyed. And the rest simply don't care because they've either seen it all, heard about it, or are disinterested in what they view as repetitive, petty squabbles. Through everything about these Shinigami, we see what Death Note is saying, that there is a seemingly unavoidable penchant for power and pride in humans that consistently leads to conflict and destruction. That lust for power is unquenchable, and from the ashes of that downfall, a new conflict will arise once the dust settles. It's like the story, through these creatures, is putting an arm around our shoulder and wryly pointing out what sad idiots these people are. The story of Kida was indeed spectacular, profound, and bombastic, but in the grand scheme of things, it was all just a drop in the ocean. Just another entry in the book. An insignificance that would return back to the status quo for the next rise and fall to take its place. And the fact that these events were entertaining and notable, but nothing new, that in itself is one of the most sobering things one can imagine. And it is a big part of the reason that I'll never stop viewing Death Note as a tragedy and an indictment. Many thanks for watching.